Look at her. Does she even know what year it is? One young man scoffed, nudging his friend as the old woman shuffled past them. She didn't flinch. She simply straightened the papers in her hand and kept walking. An old woman, silver hair, trembling hands, holding worn-out documents, just trying to renew her ID. But when the clerk scanned her faded ID card, the entire system froze. A red alert flashed across the screen. Classified asset. Access restricted. Moments later, someone from the Department of Defense walked in, and no one dared to say another word. You think you know who's standing in front of you, until the past answers for them. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above, casting a pale sheen over the DMV's aging linoleum floor. Chairs were lined in rows like forgotten chess pieces, and the scent of bureaucracy, paper, plastic, and impatience lingered heavily in the air. The glass doors opened with a dull hiss. Elaine Parker stepped inside. She moved slowly but deliberately, one hand steadying the strap of her worn leather handbag, the other clutching a file folder thick with old yellow documents. Her coat, an oatmeal-colored wool blend, hung neatly on her shoulders, buttoned all the way up despite the warmth indoors. Her silver hair, carefully brushed, framed a face that time had lined but not dimmed. Her eyes scanned the room like she was quietly calculating something, or perhaps remembering something far away. She took her place in the line. A few seats away, a young man in jeans and a hoodie nudged his friend, smirking. "Look at that! Does she even know what year it is?" he muttered, loud enough to be heard. "Probably thinks this place still runs on paper," the other replied with a snort. Elaine didn't look their way. She simply adjusted her grip on the folder and stared ahead. Behind the counter sat a young clerk, Rachel, barely in her 20s. Her ponytail swung as she typed rapidly into the terminal, visibly annoyed by whatever delay she was dealing with. As Elaine shuffled forward, Rachel barely glanced up. Her voice was clipped, rehearsed. "Next." Elaine stepped forward. She placed the folder down on the counter with both hands, gently but precisely, like setting down something valuable. "I'm here to renew my identification card," she said quietly. Rachel sighed before speaking, barely hiding her irritation. "You could have done this online, ma'am. Do you have a confirmation code?" Elaine paused, then opened the folder. Instead of a printed form, she pulled out an old military-style envelope, then a state-issued ID from decades ago, its laminate peeling at the edges. Her hands trembled, not from fear or uncertainty, but from time itself. Rachel blinked. "What is this? Do you have a current form of ID?" Elaine nodded once, slowly. "That's the most recent one I was given, after my clearance was downgraded." Her voice was soft, but there was something strange in the way she said it. Rachel didn't notice. The line behind Elaine was growing. A man in his 30s muttered loud enough for several to hear. "Jesus, people like this are why the line never moves." Another scoffed. "Does she even remember how to drive?" A few chuckles followed. Rachel ignored them. Elaine remained silent. Rachel scanned the ID, more out of obligation than curiosity. The screen blinked, hesitated, and then froze. But that moment hadn't come yet. For now the room remained ignorant. The people behind her remained impatient. And Elaine Parker stood quietly, waiting, not just for her turn in line, but perhaps for something much bigger. Because she wasn't just here to renew a card. She was walking through a system that had once erased her, now daring it to remember. Rachel tapped impatiently on the keyboard, her fingers drumming the counter as the outdated laminate ID refused to register through the scanner. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but this card doesn't even have a barcode. I'll need something newer. Digital, ideally," she said, her voice carrying the edge of frustration. Elaine remained calm. Without a word, she reached into the folds of her worn handbag and carefully opened a small, leather-bound wallet that looked military-issued, aged but meticulously kept. She thumbed through a few inner slots, then stopped. From it, she withdrew a faded military ID card. The edges were frayed, the photo barely visible beneath layers of time and wear. More notably, across the bottom of the card was a narrow black strip where something had clearly been redacted, blacked out with permanent ink or overwritten digitally. A sequence of unintelligible letters and numbers peeked out from the smudge. Rachel's eyebrows furrowed. "What is this?" she asked, her voice quieter now. Department of Defense issue. Older format, Elaine said evenly, as if she'd rehearsed the line long ago. Rachel, now more curious than annoyed, hesitated, then reached for the federal ID system terminal behind her. She inserted the card into the legacy reader port, a relic rarely used but still embedded for cases exactly like this. The screen blinked, then it glitched. Static lines shot across the monitor. The terminal let out a low beep, then an angry chirp. Suddenly, the standard DMV interface disappeared, replaced by a stark black screen with a red stripe running diagonally across it. A blinking message appeared in blocky, militarized font. Accessing restricted database. Rachel stepped back, instinctively. The mouse cursor disappeared. The keyboard locked. A loud thunk echoed from beneath the desk as the security override kicked in. Then the message changed. Classified asset identified. Level 7 clearance required. Con. Protocol red. Hold screen. The sound in the room shifted. Conversations halted. The buzz of fluorescent lights suddenly felt deafening. Every DMV computer froze. Monitors blinked into identical red screens. Printers stopped mid-page. A row of cameras mounted in the corners of the ceiling, all of which were previously pointed at waiting stations, rotated in unison, turning to focus directly on Elaine. Rachel's face turned pale. What? What just happened? She whispered almost to herself. Elaine looked at her, calmly, almost knowingly. You triggered the wrong system, she said. That ID doesn't access a license database. It used to open doors no one was supposed to walk through. Behind them, an automated voice echoed from a hidden speaker, an alert Rachel had never heard before in all her years working government systems. Identity flagged. Department of Defense alert in progress. Please remain in your position. Rachel took a shaky step back. Elaine, by contrast, stood completely still, her hands no longer trembling, her eyes locked on the red screen with quiet detachment, like someone revisiting an old scar that never really closed. People in the room began murmuring. Some stood up. Others pulled out phones only to find signal interference. The room, moments ago filled with groans and jokes, was now held in silence, broken only by the hum of the security system, now scanning Elaine Parker's presence. She said nothing, because she knew this day would come. The room was frozen in silence. Eyes turned. Screens glowed red. The air hung thick with a sudden reverence no one understood, except her. Elaine didn't move, but in her mind a voice stirred. Not one she spoke aloud, but one she'd trained herself to bury deep, activated only in moments like this, when the past pressed through the cracks of the present. They never saw us, because we were never meant to be seen. So one of the words echoed as her eyes remained fixed on the blinking screen before her. But in her thoughts, the DMV melted away, replaced by humming servers, green-lit control rooms, and operations buried so far beneath the surface of public knowledge, they didn't even have code names. Just silence. She wasn't always Elaine Parker, retired and invisible. Once she was Echo Whisper. Her real work never existed on paper. It lived in code, in encryption, in whispered channels passed between satellites and dead frequencies. She had been a data warfare specialist, one of the original architects of psychological electronic disruption operations, what the military later euphemistically dubbed signal denial with interpretive deception. But to those who truly knew her, she was the woman who could end a war without firing a shot. From a fortified room 3 stories underground, Elaine had mapped enemy communications networks, listened in on chatter across continents, and used custom algorithms to mimic voices, reroute drones, and feed disinformation into entire enemy command structures. She never saw the front lines. She built them, rerouted them, broke them apart. She didn't carry a rifle. She carried silence and made it deadly. We worked in the dark, so others could sleep in peace. She remembered her code name the day it was given to her. Echo Whisper, the one who sent signals no one could trace, but everyone reacted to. She was the ghost in the grid, the final approval signature before digital strikes were launched. The mission they never documented was her last. A recon unit, 22 soldiers, trapped near the eastern edge of the Carpathians, surrounded by hostile tech interceptors and drone surveillance. Their comms had been jammed. No way in, no way out. 3 hours before sunrise, the general in command had told her flatly, We've already lost them. But Elaine didn't accept that. She bypassed protocol, overrode two encrypted firewalls, pulled an old Russian military satellite offline, and rewired its command signal through a decoy. Then she did something no one expected. She broadcasted a false retreat order in the enemy's own dialect, matching frequency, inflection, and digital signature. She faked the enemy commander's voice so perfectly, their entire perimeter collapsed within 12 minutes. And the unit walked out. Every single one of them. They never saw their savior. They only saw the sunrise. But actions like that don't go unnoticed. Not by allies, and certainly not by enemies. For her safety, and for the secrecy of everything she touched, the department ordered her full records sealed. Not just classified, erased, no rank, no file, no awards. "You are now officially no one," the officer had said to her. "You've done more than most generals, but if anyone finds out what you did, they'll come looking." And so she faded, a name whispered only when missions failed, when systems went dark, when a protocol required a voice print no one else could replicate. "Echo whisper," someone might whisper in a situation room. "Is that asset still alive?" They didn't even know her real name. Back in the DMV, Elaine blinked once, slowly, her expression unreadable. No one in that room could possibly understand the scale of who she once was. How many men in suits had depended on her silence? How many operations bore her fingerprints even when her name was nowhere in the files? Rachel, still standing at the counter, looked at her like she was seeing a ghost. "What are you?" Elaine didn't answer, because ghosts don't speak, and legends don't explain themselves to civilians. Her past wasn't just protected by clearance. It was protected by truth too dangerous to be told. Now that truth had broken through, not by her choice, but because systems don't forget classified assets, especially not the ones who turn wars with a single whisper. The room was holding its breath, the humming of frozen computer screens, the locked printers and the blinking red alert above each DMV station had turned the usually chaotic space into a kind of tense, humming void. Then the door opened. Two men stepped in. One wore the dark uniform of a federal security contractor, with a sidearm at his waist and an earpiece pressed tightly into one ear. He scanned the room quickly, hand already hovering near his badge. But it was the man behind him who made people sit straighter. Tall, composed, early 50s, in a navy blue suit with a Department of Defense emblem subtly pinned to the lapel. His posture radiated quiet authority. He moved through the DMV lobby not like a visitor, but like someone used to walking into secure rooms with lives on the line. The sound of chairs scraping back broke the silence as several people stood up instinctively. One mother pulled her child closer. A man near the entrance dropped his phone trying to shut off the camera he had discreetly been filming with. The suited man said nothing at first. He simply walked toward the counter where Elaine Parker stood, still as stone, hands folded over her worn file, eyes calm. The DOD official reached the counter, gave a nod to the visibly shaken Rachel, and then turned to Elaine. His voice was soft, direct. "Ma'am, are you Echo Whisper?" The words cut through the air like the closing of a steel vault. Everyone stopped breathing. Elaine didn't blink. Her voice, when it came, was quiet, barely more than a murmur, but every syllable held a weight that settled over the entire room. "That's the wrong question," she said. "I never left the mission." Silence. The DOD agent exhaled slowly. He lowered his gaze as if acknowledging something older than rank, older than protocol. "Understood." He pulled a slim black device from his jacket, an official override keycard, and waved it over Rachel's locked terminal. The screen flashed green, unlocked instantly. Then he turned to Rachel, who was now pale and still clutching her clipboard like a life preserver. "You're relieved of this transaction. Thank you for your cooperation." Rachel stepped aside without a word. The DOD agent tapped something on the screen. A secondary prompt appeared. The system didn't ask for credentials. It recognized her. "Welcome, Echo Whisper," the screen read. "Manual override authorized." He turned back to Elaine. "We've been given direct orders. You are not to wait in any line. You are not to explain anything. You are not to be delayed." Elaine nodded once, curt and professional, like accepting a briefing, as if this were a return to standard operating procedure. Behind them, someone in line whispered, "What the hell is going on?" Another voice answered, breathless, "I think that old woman is a weapon." But no one dared to laugh anymore. The smirks from earlier were gone. The chuckles had died. And those who had sneered were now trying very hard not to be noticed at all. Elaine didn't gloat. She didn't look around for validation. She simply reached forward and signed the digital screen, her fingers steady now. One quiet signature. Just a name. But behind that name was enough silence to have shifted the course of wars. The agent gave a respectful nod and stepped back. "If you'd like, we've arranged an escort back to your residence." Elaine shook her head gently. "I prefer the bus." He smiled faintly. "Understood." And just like that, the agent and the guard stepped aside. The red alerts faded. Systems unlocked. The DMV rebooted. People returned to their chairs, but no one went back to normal. Because normal had just walked out the door. In the body of a woman they thought they understood. While the DMV lights returned to normal and murmurs cautiously resumed behind her, Elaine's mind drifted somewhere far away, not to the war room, nor to the silent satellites she once commanded, but to the one mission she could never forget, the one she would never forgive herself for. It had been a snow-covered valley, a covert operation meant to extract intel from an intercepted field HQ nestled along a fault line between two unstable regions. The terrain was brutal, icy, jagged, and wired with too many eyes in the sky. Elaine was monitoring from a secure uplink, tracking the team's movement in real time, coordinating encrypted signals, and overlaying enemy drone paths. They were kids, most of them. Young, eager, freshly deployed. They called themselves Ghost Dagger Team, a nickname that made them sound invincible. Some barely looked old enough to shave, but they trusted her. They called her Whisper like it was sacred, as if it made them safer. That night, everything changed. Enemy signals spiked. Communications were intercepted. A decision had to be made, fast. To stop enemy reinforcements, Elaine issued a command. Jam the southern corridor, their most likely route of escape. It was the right call tactically, but it came 12 seconds too soon. 3 of the team were still crossing that pass. By the time the terrain-laced signal blocking took effect, they were cut off, trapped. One of them, barely 20, managed to radio a final line before going dark. "Ma'am, did you mean to lock us in?" She didn't respond. Couldn't. That night she saved the mission. But she lost 3 boys she never got to meet in person. The report called it a calculated necessity. Her superiors signed off. She was offered a commendation. She turned it down. And the day she turned it down, she turned in her clearance. From that day on, Elaine Parker ceased to exist as Echo Whisper. She walked away from the command rooms, the satellite grids, the synthetic voices that had once obeyed her without hesitation. She moved into a small home on the edge of nowhere. No phones, no internet, just a notebook. And memory. She still kept their faces. Photographs, grainy, folded at the edges, tucked inside a weathered envelope, labeled only with the word Carpathian. Next to them, a hand-drawn map, sketched from memory, of the snow-covered region where they died. And every year on the anniversary of the mission, Elaine sent out 3 envelopes. Inside each, a folded copy of that map. A short anonymous message. "He was brave, he mattered, I will never forget." No return address, no name, just silence. Because some debts can't be repaid. Only remembered. Back at the DMV, as the system reset and people began pretending things were normal again, Elaine didn't feel victorious. She didn't stand taller. She didn't smile. She had simply survived. And survival in her case meant carrying the weight that no one else was allowed to see. Even now, even here, she could still feel the cold wind of that mountain pass, still hear the last radio transmission echoing in the back of her mind. "Ma'am, did you mean to lock us in?" She had never answered. Maybe because that answer was the reason she disappeared. The Department of Defense official didn't speak at first. He simply reached into the interior pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out a black folder edged in matte steel binding. It bore no name, just a raised red seal pressed into the cover. Confidential, classified level 7. He laid it gently on the DMV counter, like placing a flag on a folded casket. Rachel, the young clerk, leaned in slowly, her fingers now nervously clenching the hem of her blazer. The room behind them had gone completely silent again. All eyes were on the file, on Elaine Parker. The man opened the folder. Inside was a single sheet of paper, thick, off-white, printed with formal black type and stamped in red at the top. Elaine Parker. Status, active, restricted asset. Classification, echo whisper, rank equivalent. Tier 1, strategic operative recognition, non-public, non-decorated embedded access. Protocol, cross-system military linkage. Global. At the bottom, a line read, designation, classified asset, do not archive identity maintained in all modern military systems by automated reference ID code. Rachel's eyes widened as she read. Her lips parted slightly, unable to speak. She stared at Elaine, not with fear, not with confusion, but with something else entirely. Reverence. Finally, barely above a whisper, she asked, Why? Why doesn't anyone know about you? Elaine looked up, meeting her gaze for the first time. Not with pride, not with anger, but with something calm, something permanent. Because the ones who truly fight don't need to be known, she said. They just need to be remembered by the right people. A hush swept over the lobby. Even the children quieted. Near the back of the room, a mother clutched her son's shoulder gently, keeping him still as they watched the silent exchange unfold. The boy tugged at her sleeve and leaned in. Mom, he whispered, is she a hero? The mother's eyes didn't leave Elaine as she answered, No, sweetheart. She's the reason we still get to live like this. The reason you can sleep at night without hearing sirens. The boy looked at Elaine again, eyes wide with awe, but he didn't say another word. The DoD agent gave a final nod to Elaine, then gently closed the folder and returned it to his suit. No salute, no fanfare. Just the unspoken gravity between two people who understood exactly what silence had cost her. We'll ensure your record remains untouched, but from this day forward, no line, no scan, no delay will ever keep you waiting again. Elaine responded with a single nod, nothing more. Rachel still stood frozen behind the counter. The young woman who once rolled her eyes at a trembling old hand holding yellow documents now realized she'd just handled living military history. Someone who'd moved battles with a keyboard, who'd saved lives with silence. She blinked, then quickly reached under her desk and pulled out a permanent marker. Without a word, she scribbled something across the back of her laminated workstation badge and stuck it to the counter with firm, respectful pressure. A few customers leaned in to read the new message, handwritten in black ink. Ask their name, not their age. As Elaine turned to leave, no one blocked her path. The line that had once mocked her now stood aside in silence. Even the security guard near the door instinctively came to attention. Not because he was told to, but because something in him just knew. She didn't smile, didn't wave. She just walked toward the exit, one step at a time, her file still in hand. And as the door slid open to let her pass, the morning sunlight poured in, not warm, but clear. Like a searchlight finding its mark after decades in the shadows. She had never asked for recognition. She had only ever asked that no one else be lost the way she had lost them. And now, just for a moment, the world had remembered her. Elaine stood at the edge of the lobby as the last system rebooted, and the normal DMV chatter slowly returned. A few people tried to act as though nothing had happened, but their silence, their still eyes as she passed, told the truth louder than words ever could. A security officer stepped toward her. Ma'am, your escort vehicle is waiting. Black Suburban, right out front. Elaine glanced briefly through the window, where the polished vehicle idled at the curb, engine humming softly, a driver in uniform standing by the door. But she shook her head. I didn't arrive in a convoy, she said, and I won't leave in one. She stepped away from the counter, her shoes making the faintest taps against the tile floor. Without pause, she walked out through the DMV's front entrance and turned left, toward the bus stop. A few minutes later, she was seated on the far end of a nearly empty city bus. The vinyl seat beneath her creaked softly as the vehicle rumbled forward, its engine murmuring low over the sounds of traffic and life returning to motion. She reached into her handbag once more, but this time not for an ID, not for clearance or evidence. She pulled out a thin leather wallet, its corners worn smooth with age, and carefully unfolded a slip tucked deep inside. A photograph, grainy, edges soft from decades of being unfolded, refolded, and carried through silence. It showed 12 young men and women, some in uniform, some not, smiling at a dusty field base somewhere across the world. Arms around each other, boots in the dirt, faces lit by a sun long since set. Elaine ran her fingers gently over each face, as if reminding herself of names the world had forgotten. Her eyes didn't tear. They didn't need to. This was her ritual, her remembrance, the only ceremony she ever kept. Outside the bus window, city blocks passed. Cafes, post offices, playgrounds, rooftops lined with antennas, quietly defended by ghosts no one ever saw. There are people, a voice said in her mind, quiet and steady, who pass through this world unnoticed, and yet an entire country sleeps soundly because of them. She tucked the photo away again, sealed the wallet, and placed it back in her bag. No one on the bus knew who she was, and that, to her, meant she had done it right. Back at the DMV, Rachel sat in silence. The screen in front of her was back to normal. The keyboard worked. A new number blinked on the waiting line display, but nothing felt the same. She reached into her desk drawer, pulled out a Sharpie, and tore a piece of masking tape from the roll beside it. She stared at the blank strip for a long moment. Then she wrote, in clean, block letters, "Ask their name, not their age." She peeled back the backing and pressed the strip firmly across the edge of her counter, where the next customer would set their papers, and where every employee could see it. Because after what she had witnessed, Rachel understood something most people missed. Some of the most powerful people you'll ever meet won't look powerful at all, and some of the loudest lessons are taught in silence. In a world moving faster every day, it's easy to overlook the quiet ones. The woman at the counter who asked for help with a form, the man on the bus who walks with a cane and never speaks, the neighbor who always keeps to himself but flies the flag without fail. We pass them without thought, assuming their time has passed, that they are no longer needed. But the truth is, some of them carried entire missions on their backs. Some of them held secrets that protected thousands. Some of them walked through fire so that you and I could wake up in peace. Don't judge by appearance. Don't assume that because someone is old, they are small, because sometimes the people who seem the most ordinary are the very reason the world didn't fall apart. Elaine Parker wasn't looking for a spotlight. She never wanted medals, ceremonies, or fame. All she wanted was to keep doing her job, silently, invisibly, until it was no longer needed. But even now, even in line at the DMV, her legacy was working. Because that silence, it saved lives. We hope Elaine's story made you pause. Maybe it reminded you of someone in your life, a grandfather who never talked about the war, an aunt who kept a drawer full of old photographs and never explained why, a quiet neighbor with a firm handshake and distant eyes. We invite you to share their story in the comments. Tell us about the unsung heroes in your life, because remembering them is the least we can do. And sometimes all it takes is one story to remind someone else they're not forgotten. And now we ask you, have you ever met someone who seemed ordinary, but left you with the sense that they were once part of something much bigger? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of someone you love, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to our channel. We have more stories waiting to be told. Stories you won't find in history books, but that shaped history just the same. Let's keep those voices alive, one whisper at a time.